This is RVA Trial Lawyers, Richmond's trial lawyer podcast. Trial lawyers do not become great overnight. It takes persistence, a relentless work ethic, a willingness to learn from mistakes, a burning passion for the craft, an authentic self, and the courage and vulnerability to enter the arena time and again. Those who become great trial lawyers also become great people. Through their work, they grapple with the realities of the human condition, and in the process, cultivate character, principle, integrity, leadership, strength, compassion, and perseverance. RVA Trial Lawyers exist for Richmond's trial lawyers. Through this podcast, we hope to learn from them, support them, connect them, inspire them, and preserve their work for future trial lawyers.
All right, we're back and we've got Joe Freed joining us today. Joe, thank you so much for coming on the RVA Trial Lawyers podcast. I've followed you now for a few years and I've seen you speak many, many times. You've certainly helped me and my clients along with many, many other people.
First of all, thank you guys so much. I'm psyched to be here with you guys on close to the last day of the year. So we got this in just in time. My name is Joe Freed. I'm a trial lawyer. I practice out of Atlanta, Georgia, but I've handled cases in, I think, 42 states. So I've gotten around a little bit. And my focus is on commercial motor vehicle cases. That's what I focus on as a lawyer. But what I'm really focused on as a lawyer more these days is trying to sort of deconstruct this thing that we call trials and look at the paradigms that where we have come to believe is the way trials are supposed to look, and then kind of ask the question, is that really the best way given the attention spans and the proclivities of today's juror? I'm not sure it was ever the right way, frankly, but now I'm convinced that there's some things that we do that make it more difficult. So my life now, the practice of law is really a canvas, if you will, for me to explore what I believe to be newer ways, updated ways to do trial work. So that's kind of where I am. That's the summary of me these days.
Well, and Joe, I mean, you're teaching everywhere. I've seen you present at TLU, Trial Lawyers University in Huntington Beach. I think Trial Lawyers University in Vegas, not once, but twice. Some of the webinars that you've done. What you're doing is certainly making a difference. And then, of course, we got to share that dinner with Lambros in Vegas a couple months ago at this point. Just a really good group of people who are trying to do good work. You know, Joe, in preparing for this interview, I came up with a few pages of things that I wanted to ask you about. And I realized like there just isn't enough time in the day to talk to you about everything that I'd love to talk to you about. So I figured instead of spending a lot of time talking about what you've done and your career, there's tons of stuff online talking about how you started as a police officer and ultimately found your way, really kind of being one of the original trucking lawyers. I'd love to talk about some of the things that you talk about when it comes to authenticity and building connection with the jury. One quote that I came across yesterday of yours was, "To be a good trial lawyer, you need to be the best version of yourself. The more authentic you are, the better trial lawyer you are." Would you mind sharing with us kind of what you mean by that?
Well, I think that at the end of the day, when you talk about trial work, we can look at it a lot of different ways. But at the end of the day, we are trying to tell another human being's story to a group of human beings. And really, you can look at trial and say it's a battle of credibility. The side with the most credibility at the end wins. And so, as a general rule, I'm sure there's exceptions. And when I say that, some lawyers, I see them jump to their lawyer brain. They say, "Let me tell you about the time when." There are stories like that. But as a general rule, now you're a prosecutor. I'm sure you've seen some people go to jail that maybe there was a little question mark about, and some that went free that shouldn't have because of credibility issues, credibility of the litigant or credibility of the lawyer. And so on the civil side, we see it all the time. I mean, you hear about cases that you look at and you go, how the hell did that case even get to where it got to, either positively or negatively, whatever that means to you. So what I mean by my comment is that I've come to believe that what's most important is to be credible. And to be credible means exactly what it means from a definitional perspective. It means that I'm going to be somebody who's going to tell the truth. And I believe that that's being the best me that I can. So I have to understand myself as much as possible. I understand what my biases are. I need to understand what are the things that are going to get in the way of me being the most credible guy in the room. Because I believe that I can win cases through credibility, even when a lot of times the facts may not support me as much as I otherwise would like.
It's all about connecting, right? And so first is making that connection. If the person that you see in the mirror when you wake up is the same person that everyone else sees when you're out and about or when you're in front of a jury, then guess what? You're there, you've already made that connection because you're showing them your true self, your authentic self. So then the next step is let's start telling the story. And based on, a lot of what I've heard and looked into, the story is important because you're setting the story. You touch a lot about framing and priming. So even before you start to tell the story, there's this element of persuasion before you persuade. So if you could speak to that, and what does that mean to you?
Sure. So first, the way I like to describe it is before I start into whatever the case is about, I'm very intentional about what glasses, what lenses I want people to be wearing when they experience the story. What are they going to look through when they see whatever the facts are that we're going to be presenting? And that's what I think you're talking about when we talk about, or what you think I'm talking about. When it comes to persuasion, it's really about, it is a priming. It's about we all can probably instinctively agree that how you perceive something is going to depend on what mood you're in, what's going through your mind at the time, what recent experiences are going floating around inside of you at that moment. And so one of the things I think most lawyers overlook is their responsibility to take control of that to some degree, and there are ways to influence the lenses. That's the best way that I can say it. What frame of mind are we going to put somebody through? For instance, just a real quick example. Imagine if I'm examining a witness, I can affect how that witness is going. If I'm aggressive, or if I speak loudly, or if I speak softly. If I'm coming at something from an emotional perspective, if I come to you, Sharif, and I say, you're the truck driver in a case, and I start off by saying something like, such a day, you were driving the truck, you were doing this, and I'm coming at you like that. Imagine the responses that I'm going to get and how different they would be than if I come to you and say, for the last week, I've been trying to figure out how to even talk to you. I was up last night, and at 2:00 in the morning, I was wondering, is he sleeping well? Is there someone laying next to him who he can't really even talk to about what's really going on? My first question to you, Mr. Truck Driver, is how are you doing? So I'm going to get I'm setting a very different tone. And not only anything I do with a witness is a witnessed event by the jurors. Anything I do in jury selection with one potential juror is witnessed by everybody else in the courtroom. So it is about what Niall said about the connection piece, but not only individually, also in a group dynamic. It's happening all the time. And so I love what you said about, are you the person you see in the morning? And some people, including me for a significant portion of my practice, I didn't like who I saw when I looked at myself in the morning. I had to do work to let go of a lot of crap that was all about me trying to be something that I thought the world expected me to be. And once I let go of those things, then a different level of authenticity started to come out, because what happened was my fear. People were drawn to me. So this idea of being vulnerable that creates a connection point. So it's not only the fact that you're connecting, but at what level and in what way are you connecting, right? If you connect with somebody, the more vulnerable, the more sort of raw that base connection is, the better from my perspective. So you have to look for that. And there's ways to learn how to do that. But especially for us guys, I mean, we think we're supposed to, be that guy in the picture, with the folded arms and the badass look. And that's the image that we think we're supposed to have. But you should ask yourself the question, is that the best you to be the trial lawyer? Is that who you really want to be? Or is that what you think the world expects of you? Those are two, oftentimes for most human beings, those are very different things. And not only in a courtroom, but how about in your marriages, in your significant relationships, in your role as a dad, in your role as a husband or a friend? How are you showing up? And is that really the way you want to show up? How about we bring some intentionality to that instead of it just being the force of our habit? Make sense?
It does. When do you have this realization?
Well, I spent most of my life, Sharif, feeling like apart from everybody else, not a part of everybody else. And I've come to learn that I'm not alone in that. A lot of people have had that feeling where, they don't really feel like they're fitting in, right? Even in the middle of being a successful person, somebody who seems to have lots of friends, or whatever else, some people will get what I'm saying. You can still be very, very lonely and very alone, right? So that's how I went through my life for most of my life. And it's how I started out as a lawyer as well. And then I got exposed through the Trial Lawyers College to psychodrama, which to me, other than a few spiritual things that have happened in my life, psychodrama was the most powerful thing I had experienced. And because it confronted me with me. It confronted me with the liar who was me, the cheater who was me, the me who would would exaggerate something even if the truth was good enough, because I felt so little inside that I had to be the guy who would exaggerate, and to start to understand where some of that came from and how some of that evolved, and to get to things that frankly were at the core of me that felt very inferior. So I had to find a worthiness that I didn't have. And through psychodrama and what started with psychodrama, which is this terrible name for a very powerful thing. I mean, it's an experiential psychotherapy is what it is. So that's how it started. So it started with me kind of confronting me and starting to come to terms with somebody who I don't even really recognize anymore from when I look back in the past, and I just kind of shake my head, and then it's about as soon as I do that, that guy shows back up and looks at me in the mirror, and I have to realize it's always a work in progress. So I don't want anybody to think I've reached some place. It's not about reaching a place. It's about a journey.
And you touch on something that's so powerful, and that is we often want to fit to form rather than create form. Because there's image everywhere. Right? We see it on social media, we see it in the courtroom, we see it in movies. But sometimes the best form is the form that you create, because that is who you are. And it's when you create that form, that's when you're like, this is special. This is so special, and I can do so many special things with what I've created. And people start to see it because it's special about who you are as a human that they haven't seen. Because form as a whole has been seen. That's why it's something that people see. That's why you try to fit into it. But it's when you create that something that no one has seen, that's when it becomes special. And that's when you become Joe Fried.
Well, and I would say, I love what you said. I would add maybe saying some part of that a little bit differently by saying whether they've seen it or not, it's what they expect, right? When we as lawyers or as men, however we're coming into our lives, I mean, in whatever relationship we're in, we're talking trial work here. So as a lawyer, you step in as a prosecutor, you step in as a plaintiff's lawyer. The people who don't know you, they have a certain expectation of how you're going to be, right? And if you're a plaintiff's lawyer, they don't think real highly of you, right? They think you're going to lie to them. They think you're willing to do anything to win. They think that, all these things. And if you're a prosecutor, depending on where you are, right? I mean, once upon a time, prosecutors got immense respect. In some places that's still true. In other places you have to work really hard because there's a distrust of the system now, right? And anything that's authority. So I think that the question is, when you get up as a lawyer, as a man, as a lawyer in front of a group of people who are strangers, and you rip your chest open and show them your heart, and that can be personal or it can be about your case. You come in and you just rip yourself open and say, look, I'm representing this person who did this, and I don't like that about them. Well, wait a minute, you're the guy representing them. Yeah, I am. Would you like to know why? Right? Yeah, I mean, but I've gone through this struggle to get to this place. I'm not doing a great job explaining this, but the idea is, if you are, I call it being shockingly vulnerable. If you come in and you are shockingly honest about some problem in your case, the part of them that has judged you as being the person who's going to lie to them has to pause and say, well, wait a minute, that guy just shared that with me? That's not what I expect of that person. And I like it. And I feel safer with that person. And I don't think they're going to lie to me about other things if they're willing to share that with me. And so that's what I meant earlier, even about credibility. I think that you get points for that help you. You get more points for exposing something negative, shockingly negative, than you do lose points for whatever it is that is shockingly negative. But you being willing to be the vulnerable one exposing it, it's like, holy moly, man, that was risky. But that guy's straight up. Isn't that who you want to be at the end of the day? Don't you want every juror at the end, if they just come up to you and say, dude, you were straight up, and I saw that, that's a victory to me. Because we should be playing this game as a long game, not a short game. That means that there's some cases we probably are supposed to lose. If you're trying cases, you ought to be probably losing some cases. That if you're trying, you can make your own call about that. But if you're, it should be a long game. You should be willing to lose a case in order to develop and continue to develop your reputation as being a badass trial lawyer. Because badass trial lawyer does not mean you never have lost. That's a fallacy in my view. Anyway, I'm rambling. Sorry.
And it's so powerful. And you're right, that shocking vulnerability, we don't see it often. And it's actually not even taught, because when you look at what the teachings that are out there, they're like, well, yeah, there's a weakness. You got to sandwich your weakness. You got to start with something great, and then you just drop this in and something. But no, you stand right in front of it and you own it. Because when you own it, guess what? You've gained the standing for them to listen to the words that are coming out of your mouth now, and you've given them credibility, and everything else that comes after it, they're gonna be like, yes, we like this guy. This guy's gonna tell us the way things are.
Right. That's right. And by the way, it's not only the jurors who are looking for that, it's also the judge who's looking for that. In my experience, I've been all over the country. The judge picks a lawyer in just about every case who they look to give them the straight answers if they can. And you want to be that lawyer. At least I want to be that lawyer. You have to make a call for yourself. Do you want to be somebody who can go sell ice to Eskimos, and that's what you believe is success? That's your definition of being, that's the persuader you want to be? Or do you want to be known as the person who is absolutely credible? And I'm not talking about only in a specific case. I think it's a huge point that we don't talk about enough. It's a long game. You're building your reputation every step of the way, and it doesn't take too many times. You can have a good reputation, screw it up real quickly, right? So if you get so hung up on what does a win look like in a very specific case, you might do things that are not consistent with the human being you really want to be perceived as in the long run. And I think it's a mistake to bow to that, even though all the pressures of winning, being the zealous advocate, will happen.
We dived right in and we got really deep, right off the bat. But what led Joe to be where he is today? Like what led him into the path that made him Joe Freed today? I mean, what is it?
Gosh, I don't know. I started out was a police officer. I fell in love with courtrooms when I was a police officer because of the energy. And I sat there and I realized, this is a place where important stuff happens. And the quality of the lawyer makes a big difference. I mean, anybody who thinks justice is totally blind is blind, as far as I'm concerned, right? So I've been on a journey, and law has been the perfect road for my journey, because it's helped me. I'm work in progress. I mean, I love this because this profession has given me a chance to be what I think. I'm naturally a student of human, like the human animal. How do we work? I mean, when I was a cop, and my brothers and sisters would come up to a situation where people were fighting and they try to yell louder than everybody else, I'd come in and talk real soft, and everybody'd calm down, right? I mean, so I was a kid doing that. So in law, it's like this phenomenal people watching place where you get to be a student of yourself and other people. And it's tremendous. And courtrooms are just special places to me. I mean, magical things happen, and it's just a phenomenal place to be able to try to understand ourselves and other people, and how people make decisions, and how people are persuaded. And so I know I'm not really answering your question, but
No, you are. I mean, we're all, what I love about you and how you present, it's more about the human part than it's about the attorney part. It's human behavior. That's what matters, right? We're students of, you said it, the student, human animal, the human behavior of it. And a lot of people lose sight of that. A lot of people think you got to get up and act like a lawyer. No, 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 no. You get up and you're a human being, and it's not very complicated, because the person you're trying to connect with, first, they share 99.9% of your DNA.
that's
And
right.
second, they are the person that you are, that you've been your whole entire life. So keep it simple. Keep it simple.
I totally agree with what you're saying. I mean, what you said, it's about, I've been accused of not letting the law or the facts get in the way of my case, which somebody thought was an insult. I didn't take it as an insult. But because I think the facts are what you make them to be, right? I mean, especially when you're a prosecutor or you're a plaintiff's lawyer, we share one thing in common. We get to be the author of our case. We get to put the ink, we get to put the paint on the canvas. So we choose what we make the case about. And too many lawyers get hung up on the specifics of an event, and they say the case is about an event that happened. In my truth, the event is only a starting place to start to explore what's really the case needs to be about. And I say it that way on purpose. The case has a need. There's a story in there that needs to be told, one that is going to more likely than not be victorious for my side. My job is to pick the chapters, to pick the characters, to pick the storyline. And it's very emotional. I mean, the reality is, people outside of law know that decisions are made at an emotional level, and then human beings backfill whatever logic we need to support our decision. That's not me just making that up or saying that. I mean, there's study after study after study that shows that to be true. We intellectualize a process that's not intellectual. It's all done at the heart level. And so if we know that to be true, then we should all be re-examining how we're lawyers. Because if we learn to speak to that emotional truth of somebody, it's the other side's not going to beat you, because you're speaking to the underlying thing. I mean, it's time and time again proven out. I mean, I could give you examples if you're interested, but it's what you make the case about that matters. I give you a real quick example. I represented a few years ago. I represented a Muslim family in a place that, let's just say, is not friendly to a Muslim population. And what was done in that case in jury selection? Actually, my law partner did the jury selection, but the strategy there was to try to get people to own their prejudice, but then focus on the oath that you're going to take as a juror. And actually, the first time I did it, it was a case that involved two Hispanic people who, in another sort of ICE jurisdiction. But the idea was to get jurors focused on the idea that somebody in this case is going to try to get you to violate your oath. Okay, you're in the case. So what focus group research showed me before that was people who have the prejudices that I was concerned about, what was more important to them than the prejudice was that they would be viewed as somebody who would honor their oath. And so the whole case was about, to me, was about challenging a jury about whether or not they were going to allow somebody to violate their oath. Well, think about that for a second. What was the only way for them to prove to the world and themselves that they didn't violate their oath? Fine for the Hispanic people, fine for the Muslim people. The idea is you choose, you're employing the jury in every trial, you're employing the jury to do something. It's worth thinking about what are you employing them to do and to recognize that you have much more influence over what that is than what you were taught in law school.
You touched on something powerful, and what you just touched on, I don't know if you've ever witnessed a motion to recuse a judge, but if you have, you will see that if the judge that doesn't recuse himself, because based on a view, they're a bit now more cautious too towards your client, because they're like, well, they see it this way. I don't want them to see it this way. So when it's a close call, they will rule in the favor of the person who actually moved to recuse, because they know that the lens is on them. And here with these particular jurors, you kind of said, there's a lens of prejudice. And then there is your character, that oath about being who you are, and you've taken in, and you made the character and that oath kind of overshadow that prejudice.
And I also owned in that case. I got in closing argument. I got up and I said, "Look, I know you want to reach the right verdict for the right reason, and I have to tell you, I'm not the strongest person in the world, and I'm afraid that if I were on a jury like this, I would let things that I'm not supposed to be thinking about come into my head, even if I didn't want them to. But here's what's more important to me than anything else. I wouldn't want to wake up 2 days from now and realize that I reached the wrong verdict for the wrong reason. I want to make sure. So I need my brothers and sisters who are on the jury with me to, if you see me doing that, I need you to gently but firmly remind me. I want to reach the right verdict for the right reason, man. We've taken an oath that we're going to set aside those things that are perfectly human to think about, but they're not supposed to be part of this trial. We've agreed that we're going to do that. And so you kind of put yourself in with them. And the worst thing to credibility is to be perceived as holier than anybody, right? So you want to join the jury. You don't want to be that guy who's pointing at the jury and saying, you must do, no. Hey, look, man, we're people. We got this. People, the way we work, it's kind of weird, isn't it, folks? But what you said is great insight when you pointed out what the judges do. That's also true of every human being. If you're a parent, it's true because your kids have done it to you. And if you're a kid, it's true because you've done it to your parents. It's fascinating. These are the kind of things that I spend my life thinking about. Like coming to the recognition that you want people to say no quickly. The quicker they say no makes room for them to say yes. I don't know, are either of you dads or either of you parents?
Yep, I've got two little ones.
Well, yours is how old? So you're at the very beginning. But for parents out there, your gut reaction, your kid comes and says, I want blah, 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 or I want to do blah, blah, blah. And you say, no. And then within 15 minutes, you've talked yourself out of the no. And then it becomes a yes, and they didn't even have to do anything. They don't have to keep begging. They just let you go through the human process of going from no to yes, finding a way. So, those kind of things, when you study them in the psychological world, in the neuro world, and then you apply those things into the legal context, it's amazing. It's such a fun way to practice law because it goes beyond what the traditional is. So it's fun. It's fun for me, at least.
Well, now and I think both agree that being a trial lawyer is the coolest job in the world. I don't know what I would do if it wasn't for this work. Joe, you touched on a minute ago how we are the authors of the story, especially the plaintiff's attorney in a civil case and the prosecutor in a criminal case, largely because, we get to go first. We get to put on the lens. Niall and I often talk about, or at least I do when I'm trying to convince Niall to come be a plaintiff's attorney, that this work is just like prosecution if you're doing it right. When you're telling your story, a lot of the research has shown, right, that as a plaintiff's attorney, we want our focus to be on the system failure, the corporation's negligence, how all the opportunities of which they could have stopped this but chose not to, right? The red flag, like Zach Oliver has talked about before. When you're thinking about how to frame your story, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, there's probably a lot of things I'm thinking about, but one of the things that's in the back of my mind is always what is going to be the story, right? I mean, what is it going to be? Because I'm not bound by the event. I play with time frames all the time. For instance, you think of a sideswipe case where there's always a defense to a sideswipe case that the quote victim was in a blind spot, right? Or something like that. So I'm not going to fight the fight there. I'm going to fight the fight back up the road where the truck driver was supposed to be checking their mirrors to look for people who were approaching their blind spot. Well, were you doing that? Tell us where that was. They can't do it, right? But I am also looking for how can I take the case to something more systemic, because here's the reality. No matter how bad a crash is and how bad the injuries are, the jury can't really go and change anything about it. They can't. So I want to find something that I can motivate a jury to do something that's actually in their own best interest. So the reason systemic issues are more powerful is jurors can fix something and they can feel good about fixing something that will prevent things from happening in the future, right? In their community. If I can talk to you about this one truck driver who was speeding, or I can talk to you and caused a wreck, or I can talk to you about a trucking company that has 100 truck drivers running through your community every week, and they have a speeding problem. Which one do you think is going to motivate a jury to the place that I want them to be more? And also, the reason systemic is more powerful is because it's easier to find against a system than it is to find against an individual. Somebody might like the truck driver. They might be concerned that if they find against a truck driver and award $10 million, that truck driver's ruined forever and ever and ever. And they may not want somebody who they like to be ruined forever and ever. In my recent Amazon trial, the jury found 85% against Amazon for failure to train the driver. It's because the driver was one of the nicest guys in the world. And so they didn't want to hurt the driver. So they found against Amazon. I'm convinced of that anyway. I mean, I don't have empirical proof of that, but I believe it to be true. I'm also always looking, and you've heard me talk about this when I talk about speed trial concepts, I'm looking to reduce the case down to something that creates binary choices for jurors, because in my experience, jurors want the lowest, I want the lowest cognitive load. I don't want them to have to work any harder than they need to in order to find for me. So I work things down to a binary choice where they get to decide something that might be as simple as violate your oath or not violate your oath. It might be something very specific to a case, like, the driver in a recent case, the defense position was this driver would have lost control on this wet road regardless of the speed because it was 100-year rain. And so the binary choice was he would have lost control. I don't believe that anybody loses control at any speed. I think that's a ridiculous statement that they made. So I made that the binary choice. You're either going to find he would have lost control at any speed, or you're going to find that he was driving too fast for conditions. So I create it into a binary choice for them, and then they have an easier decision point. So there's lots of things that go into the story. It's also, when it comes to damages in cases, we talk about liability all the time, but the damages side of cases is something that also these same things we've been talking about are super important, right? I mean, it's not like the difference between, let's say, somebody losing. I helped a person with a case recently where a lady down and broke her leg, her foot, and her foot largely healed up, but she had pain now when she wore high heels. I mean, for a lot of people, that's not that big of a deal. But if you think about what's beneath the idea of putting on high heels for a woman, right? And none of us are genetically qualified to answer that question, but we can use our imagination. It's the same thing that when Niall puts that beautiful watch on, how he feels when he puts it on. It makes him feel a certain way. We don't even have a word for it in the English language, but it's badassery. That's what it is. I feel beautiful. I feel like my legs are long. I feel like my stand a little taller. For me, as shallow as this makes me sound, is when I crank my car, and it has a sound, and it just makes me feel good, man, So, and it's becoming watches, unfortunately for me. So the idea is now, what if jury selection is now about, so what's it for you, Sheriff? What is it that makes you feel that way? Is it a suit that you have? Is it a car that you have? Is it the way it is when you pick up your kid and you look at your beautiful child and you say, man, I did that. I made this. I mean, what is it that makes you feel that way? Whatever we call that. And what if that's jury selection? Tell me now, what are the things that make you feel like that? I see you're wearing a watch. How do you feel when you put that sucker on? Yeah. What else is it for you? What are the things? That's the jury selection. And then the question of the jury, the binary choice on damages is, so look, here's why we're here. They think this is about a broken foot. This isn't about a broken foot. They say that feeling that I'm talking to all of you about, that's not very valuable. That losing that feeling is not valuable. And I say it's very valuable. And that's why we're really here at the end of the day. It's not about the fall down. It's not even about the broken foot. It's about that feeling. And they say it's not valuable. I say it is. This is your community. I'm going home after this case to my community. I think I know what my community would say about the importance and the value of this, but you get to decide for your community. I'm not letting them decide this. And I know I don't get to decide. That's why we need you. We had to pull you away from your offices and your businesses and your families to answer this question for your community. You're either going to say it's not worth much. You're going to put a small number on that piece of paper, and they're going to have been right all along. Or you're going to feel like I feel. This is important, and this is valuable. And me losing the ability to feel that feeling, that's freaking huge. And you put a big number on that piece of paper, and you tell them, no, in our community, that human thing that we don't even have a name for, it's valuable as hell. And that's the binary choice for the jury, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on. You ask the question about what am I thinking about, and you now see it's liability, it's damages, but what is it that we're employing the jury to do? And can I bring it down into something that's innately human? I love a jury selection where I get to say, folks, what are the most valuable things in your life? And you know what I know after practicing all over the country? I know that people are going to say family. I know that people are going to say relationships. I know that people are going to say the idea of being independent. I know people are going to talk about health. I know people are going to talk about the concept of being able to self-determine their life. I know people are going to talk about the opposites of it, which would be, I don't want to be a burden on anybody who I love. That's like the worst thing for me, right? And I bet all of those things I just said are true for both of you, right? And my bet is there's not a jury you can impanel where those things aren't true for all of them. Well, if we already know this stuff to be true universally, then these are the kind of things I'm thinking about. Don't I want to kind of make my case about that? Folks, this is about a broken foot, but it's really not. It's about how it affects relationships. It's about how it affects the family in this case. It's about how it's changed my client's relationship with his little boy. That's what it's about. It's not about a broken foot. It's about something that's universally true and universally human. And we could do the same thing on the criminal side, right? What are your juries going to say? They're going to say safety. They're going to say security. They're going to say that the things that are important to them is how people are treating each other these days, right? I mean, the devaluation of life, video games and what they've done to our community. I mean, whatever those things are that they're going to say in your community, it comes down to safety and security and those things. Well, if that's the case, then your criminal case should be, this is about this guy. But you know what it's really about, folks? It's really about the way people are treating each other these days. It's about the devaluation of human life. That's what this thing's about. You know, it's about these things that are universally true because of what you said before, and that's that we share 99 point something percent of the same DNA. I don't care if you're what side of the Middle East you're on. I don't care what side of the street you're on. I don't care what side of anything. I don't care the color of your skin. I don't care any of those things because you're uniquely human, and that means sort of the Maslow's hierarchy applies to all of us at some level. And we as lawyers have not appreciated that historically. We have not built our cases around those things that are human. That's what my life's about.
Joe, you touched on something that I can relate to greatly. To me, family is everything. Mom and dad and my siblings are my world. I fuel every day off their love. And, with every case, when I do a murder case, I sit with the family and I want a mother to write something special about their lost one. I want a father to write something special about their lost one. I want a brother to write something special about the lost one, and a sister, and an aunt, and an uncle, and a friend. And then if there's a girlfriend, then a girlfriend, or a wife, or a child.
It could be somebody at the grocery store. It could be somebody at the church. It could be somebody at the Boy Scout convention. It doesn't, just real people is what you're saying.
Without a doubt. And the reason why I do that, because I'm going to be able to have at least each juror relate in some way to the loss of this individual.
Story evokes story. So if I tell you a story, when I said pick up your child, now you're not a parent yet, Niall. We'll work on that while we get you over to the plaintiff side. But everybody who's a parent goes to a time when they picked up their little kid, or they're picking up a grandkid, or some kid you're picking up, or you go to a place where you were picked up, or you think about what it's going to be like to pick up your child. So story evokes story. Go to the movies, a sad movie, and you start to get sad. Why are you sad? It's just light focusing on a board. What makes you get sad is you as a human being already know what it is to be sad. So that story evoked your story. Something brought sadness, right? So when you tell, like you just did, we on the plaintiff side, we call that using before and after witnesses. The most powerful witnesses in a case are not experts. They're not technical people. They're people who get up and they say, let me tell you about Billy. Let me tell you about the time when Billy came to save my life. Let me tell you about, the time that, whatever. And it's a little vignette. And that's all that's necessary because now you know everything you need to know about Billy, what kind of human being Billy is, right? And so it's worth, and I think what you're doing is brilliant when you go and you pick these people who are in the person's life. On our side, what I advocate to plaintiffs' lawyers is choose your before and after witnesses, choose a bunch of them. Think of them as arrows in a quiver. And you don't choose which ones you're going to necessarily use at the trial until you see who is impaneled as the jury. If I have sister, what you're talking about, on the jury, and I know that because of jury selection, then I pull the sister quiver, arrow out, and I shoot sister with sister, right? So if I have a plumber on the jury, and I happen to have a plumber in my before and after, or a tradesman in my before and after, that guy's getting called because they're going to relate to each other, right? If I have somebody who went to XYZ high school, and somebody on the jury went to XYZ high school, I don't care if it's the same year or not. In fact, it's probably better if not. It doesn't matter. You still somehow, if someone comes to you, I don't know where either of you guys went to school, but if someone comes up to you on the street and says, hey, I went to such a, you suddenly, like they're your friend. You don't even know who the hell they are. They could be the worst person in the world, but suddenly you have a kinship with them, right? So that happens on juries too. So the more similar people are, this is sort of the law of rapport, is the idea, you could talk about it with mirror neurons and whatever else, but the more somebody perceives you as the same as them, the more safe and more credible they're going to perceive you. So jury selection becomes something very different than what we were all taught in school, which is to look for biases. It's actually the perfect place to look for connections. It's the perfect place to build a group, a tribe, a group around a very specific concept, like family, like these things that we know will pull people together, even if they're from different walks of life, even if they're from different socioeconomic levels. You talk about value of life and talk to people about that. And, it's pretty amazing. I mean, and I've had the great honor of being able to speak to lots of people from lots of different places. And I've found to be true what you said earlier. That's that people are almost entirely the same at the core. They just might look different than you. They might have bigger muscles than you or smaller muscles. They may be able to dunk a basketball. They may be able to bowl 300. They may be able to dance the cha-cha. It doesn't matter. At the end of the day, what's behind dunking a basketball and what's behind being a badass cha-cha dancer is the same feeling. It's human, it's innate, and it's very real and powerful. And that's where decisions are made, like we talked about earlier. The biggest fallacy in what we do is the idea that people make decisions based on logic. They don't. And even the idea that they do is just it's not true. We've seen it a gazillion times. Each of you have seen it a gazillion times.
When we make our own decisions, right? I mean, I had a few too many cookies this morning when I woke up, and I'm sure that had nothing to do with logic, and that made my time at the gym a little harder. But anyways, this is great stuff. Joe, are you familiar with the book about the elephant and the rider? I forgot what the book's called, but basically the premise of it is exactly what we were talking about. I believe the cover has a picture of an elephant and then a rider on the elephant. And he says, well, reason is the rider, emotion is the elephant. And as we've talked about, the elephant is going to direct which way you're going, right? It's an incredible analogy. So talking about value.
Yeah, I'd probably like that book. I mean, that's summing up what I'm trying to convey to people.
I'll get it to you after this call. So I'll send
You
it's
don't
a
have to
good
do
book.
that. I'll pick it up.
Well, I'll send
I'm
you the
a great-
information then.
Yeah,
But
thanks.
the first time that I think I heard you speak was a couple years ago at Vegas. I think you were presenting with Rex Parrish at the time. And I remember Rex at one point looked at the audience and said, there are two reasons why you all are sitting down there and we're standing up here. And the two main reasons are, one is that you're settling your good cases, you're not trying them. And that two, you're just not asking for enough money. And then I remember you made a comment along the lines of that we as plaintiff attorneys need to stop devaluing our cases, that we should be asking for more money, and that the test to figure out how much to ask for is to stop and to think, if this injury happened to me or a loved one, how much would it be worth? And that to me has changed everything.
Well, I'm glad. I'm horrified to hear if I ever make a comment that somehow suggests that I'm better than anybody. I react to that because it's not true. And so I hope that I would never try to make somebody feel like I'm somehow better if I'm standing in front of somebody else. But beside that, getting to your point, I do think that the limiter is us, right? And the jurors have no idea what a case is worth, especially when you're talking about non-economic damages. And I say, Niall, if I say to you, because this is not your field directly, but if I say to you, somebody's going to be in pain for 30 years, every single day they're going to be in pain for 30 years. 30 years. And it's real pain. I've shown it to you. It's not BS. Okay. What should the value of that be? Don't answer. Okay. But you probably, your truthful answer is, I have no friggin' idea. Tell me what the answer is. Right. And if I said to you, look, in today's day and age, when you have somebody like this with these kinds of injuries and this kind of pain forever, that's a $30 million injury. And it doesn't matter what they did for a living before, but pain every single day for 30 years is kind of like a prison sentence and a $30 million injury. If I have lived my life credibly with you, which is the payoff, this is the payoff for that. I get to look at you and say, $30 million. And you go, all right, 30 million. No, you don't, because you're not seeing me as the guy who's trying to sell you snake oil, right? Now, if I've been a bullshitter through the whole thing and I come up and say, glitz and whatever, and I'm not connected, and I say 30 million, you're going to reject it out right and say, well, that's probably X. But even that, even if you reject it and say even X, you might say, well, it's 3 million, not 30. Well, a lot of plaintiff lawyers be tickled pink with 3 in that case, right? So the more you ask for, when I was coming up, the teaching was always, if you ask for too much, you will get nothing. And I think there's probably a level where that's true, but it's much less true than what it was sold as initially. What my life demonstrates and what my research demonstrates is that the more you ask for, the more you get. Even if they reject your number, they reject it in favor of something else that's bigger than you otherwise. You ask for 10, they give you 3, but 3 would have been much more than you used to ask for, right? By the way, if you ask for 3, you're usually going to get, much less, right? So there are exceptions, but I think the best way to do it, and it's what I tell people, is you have to believe your number the best that you can. And so the more it is true for you and really, really true, the more it's going to ooze out of you as being truthful. And so the question is, why do you believe whatever you believe? If a lot of times people will put out something on a listserv and say, how much is this broken arm worth? Or how much is this whatever worth? And people will respond with a number. And what that number is based upon their experience in settling cases. This is what an insurance company paid me. So that becomes their self-fulfilling reality. But let me ask you something. How old is your child?
Oh, I have a
Sure.
4-year-old and a 10-month-old.
Okay. So I'm picking the 10-month-old, forgive me, because it gives me chills to even do it, but I'm picking the 10-month-old because 10-month-old's even more vulnerable than the 4-year-old to you right now because they're so young. But let's say somebody came and busted the hell out of your 10-month-old's arm. What kind of, God forbid. What's the value of that case? Okay. Compared to if I just said a broken arm case, right? And so if a broken arm for whoever the person is, I like to say it, not even yourself, but who's the person who's most vulnerable, who you love most and care most about, most protective about? Who is it? Now it's your mother, I know. So no, but seriously, if somebody came and hurt, you'd rather them hurt you than hurt your family, right? So I think
Without a doubt.
God forbid, on all these things, I hate even talking about it. I get chills to talk about it because I don't want to believe our words are powerful. So but the idea is, if you think about that and you say, okay, well, if it's worth that in my mother's case or my child's case, then why shouldn't it be worth that for this human being? And it shifts something in your own mind. It's not a sales tactic except to yourself to make you challenge what you once upon a time thought was your truth about what the value is. So if the case is worth X, but then you think about it and you go, why not 3X or 5X? And that's what I challenged people at TLU. I said, I got people to throw out numbers about what their case value was. And I said, why not 3 times that? Tell me, why is your number right and my number wrong? And they couldn't answer it. Right?
That's so powerful. I'll tell you, Joe, you are right. It is my mom. And when it comes to a question about the value of pain or suffering to someone that you love, like, it also depends on the way of life. You ask me, I love life. I wake up every day, and if you ask me now, is there anything you want in life? And I look up and ask God to turn seconds into minutes, and that's all I want. I don't want more money. I don't want anything other than just slowing time, down time, just because I love life so much. So you bring that to me, and you're like, hey, paying for 30 years, 30 million is nothing for that, right?
That's right.
Nothing.
See, I was actually hoping that we would have this discussion
Yes.
because I've succeeded in I've succeeded in, not necessarily with you. I'm just saying,
Yes.
I feel like
Without a doubt.
if I've just planted the seed with somebody. I mean, on a recent jury selection, a guy who was very conservative, wearing a MAGA hat, the whole 9 yards, said he said, we were talking about value of life. And he said, wait, the law here is the value of life I get to pick the value of my own life, basically. It's through my own eyes. I said, yeah. He goes, why not 100 million? I said, well, why not, sir? Are you worth that? I mean, I don't know if that's too much or not. It's not for me to decide. You guys are going to be the ones deciding. And I looked at a police officer who was on the thing, and I said, I was a police officer. Now I'm this big shot lawyer, right? So my life's worth more than yours, right? He goes, well, respectfully, I don't think so. I said, well, hopefully you see that I don't think so either. So it's kind of ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, your life, it's talking about life. It shouldn't be you chose to be a public servant. I chose to be this now, right? And, dot, 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 dot. So we had this talk about value of life. So we get, it's again, what are you asking the jury to do? What are you challenging them to do? In that case, I represented somebody who was a homeless schizophrenic. And my theme is the value of the least of us is what the value that we ascribe to human life. So who is the least of us? And who gets to decide who the least of us is, right? And so that was jury selection. Who's the least of us? Who gets to decide? And I told a story about my son who went through a period of time. He's an addict. And it's the reason why I didn't realize it until that moment, why that case was in my life. Because something we haven't talked about is I think the case finds the lawyer. And our job becomes to figure out why that case, why the universe or God, whatever you want to say. I'm not trying to get into a spiritual thing, but why did that case get put in your lap? There's a reason for it if you choose to look for it. And it may be more profound than you realize. For me, that case, everybody was like, why the hell are you taking this case, Joe? And I realized during that situation that my son went through a period where he's an addict now, but he's in recovery. And there was a time when what I said to the jury is I said, I started crying and I literally said, okay, I think I figured out why I'm here. So there was a time when if I walked by somebody on the street preaching to a lamppost, I would have made a wide arc around them. And 5 minutes later, if you asked me about him, I'd have said, what? Who? I mean, what are you even talking about? I wouldn't have even seen him. And I said, well, I've had the experience now where I've watched my son preach to a light pole in a total whack out place where he was talking about easy as 1, 2, 3, ABC, and if you would have judged the value of him then. But here's the thing, I can't walk by the guy on the street anymore, preaching a lamppost and wonder whose son he is. Wonder whose dad he is, whose brother he is. And who am I to say that my life's worth more than his? To me, it's the ultimate in arrogance for me to say that. And then you're judging him at that moment in his life. What about the rest of the life? What about what could have been life? What, all those things. And so that was the jury selection and it was interesting because the juror said, I think you're too emotional for this case. And I said, I'm actually a pretty good lawyer. I know it may not look like it up here right now, but how many people do you think are lined up to talk about the value of this guy's life? And I literally had an African-American man on the back go like this. But that's what this is supposed to be about. I mean,
It should be.
we're all so blessed.
That's what we lose sight of.
So blessed, man. I mean, and if you run at this very surface level, if you let it sink in, man, I mean, even a case that you think of as a routine case, it's not routine. The world put it in your way for a reason. And magic is going to happen in that case if you figure out why. If you figure out why, magic will happen. I don't know. No, I'm emotional talking about this stuff, but I believe that to the core of who I am. That these cases, and even when it's, quote, routine, man, a juror is going to watch you and you don't have any idea what impact that's going to have on them down the road.
So we owe the connection on the watches to your son. Little did I know, so and that's a connection that we made prior to going on air. And little did I know that I owe him a thank you, or he knew that he was going to get me to connect with another human being that I was able to, learn from so much and appreciate for who he is. And that's all because of your son, the person who was having that conversation with the light pole.
Well, that's a different son, but
well,
yeah,
at least one of the kids that was, right?
Yeah.
So that's the thing about it.
Yeah, but it's true. You never know. You never know I mean, again, I'm not trying to make this into a spiritual thing, but you never know what impact you're going to have. You never know. They talk about, sometimes at the right minute, the value of a smile is you save somebody's life. Somebody saw you smile at them when they needed it in a way that you had no idea. And you go on with your life, you don't even know what you did. But the same is true when you're cruel. You have no idea what you did, man. You have no idea what you did,
Joe, I'll tell you, you remind me of my personal statement that I wrote to law school. Let me tell you what it started with. An optimist sees the opportunity in every difficulty, but a pessimist sees the difficulty in every opportunity. And that's how I started my personal statement for law school, because it was the journey of struggle that led my family to where we're at today. And we found the beauty in the struggle. And that beauty is what I always focused on. And the beauty is what I sing and dance in every single day.
I love that, man, because my saying is that the universe is always conspiring in your favor. It's true even when you're going through the struggle. So if you believe that, what you just said, then in the middle of the hardest challenges of life, you get to say to yourself, I can't wait to see what's going to be great about this. I just can't wait, even though it freaking sucks right now. But I can't wait to see how you're going to turn this into something beautiful.
And I do look often upwards to say thank you, because it did turn up into something that's beautiful that I didn't foresee at the time.
You wouldn't be who you are. I think you should be very proud of who you are. I think you are. And you should be, because so you wouldn't be who you are. You wouldn't have the heart that you have. You wouldn't have the eyes to see, the heart to feel, the ears to hear, if you didn't go through the things that you went through. And I don't think it's only personal. I think there's something about the whole family. Like, we're all connected in a way that you go through something, it's you can feel the struggles of the people of your past. They're part of you and part of what you bring into the world. They're that DNA piece that we're only starting to understand. They're there with you. Some of them you want to get rid of them, but you can't. I mean, this is what we're supposed to do. It's supposed to be this human endeavor. We're supposed to be, I think, models for doing things appropriately. And part of that is when we screw things up, to own it as fully as possible. And that's part of being credible. If you want to be the most credible person in the room, for me, I have to get up every day and say, you're going to be the most credible person in the room, even when I screw that up, because the most credible person in the room doesn't never screw up. They just, when they screw up, they recognize it quicker and they own it quicker, and they don't diminish themselves by it. They just because you screw something up doesn't make you less worthy. You own it, you move on from it, and you actually become a model for other people who then hopefully will model that. Kind of becomes a ripple effect, the pebble in the water kind of a thing. But so I want to ask you guys a question before we get done. What made you guys decide to do this podcast and also to do it together, bringing a prosecutor and a plaintiff's lawyer together? Am I allowed to ask the
Of course. I'll have to restart that, because it was his idea.
Well, Niall and I are very good friends. So when we worked at the prosecutor's office together, I think he and I.
Oh, you were going to say you, but I'm glad that that's not.
Well, we're not going to talk about that one. But no, actually, I just had a case against Enrico, and anyways, and so hopefully Niall doesn't prosecute me. But anyways, we connected very quickly on our love for trial work and doing it differently, and meaning not just showing up and going through the motions and following the textbook approach that they teach in law school, but being intentional about approaching your case and understanding what you're trying to achieve and being okay stepping outside of the box to use tools to get there. And so through months, if not even years of just talking, going back and forth, talking about all these different trial strategies and all this and all that, we're like, you know what? let's just do a podcast so we can start to interview people, so we can continue to learn from people around the Richmond, Virginia area, around the state of Virginia. And then only recently we've kind of opened it up, and now we're having people from around the country join us. And so I think the desire has been, one, just pure curiosity, because we want to continue to learn, and we recognize that one of the best parts about this practice area is that it is a nonstop learning. And then also we wanted, especially for some of the practitioners in our area, we wanted an opportunity to preserve their voices. Right? There are a number of really amazing trial lawyers in the Richmond, Virginia area who we've learned from, and hopefully will continue to learn from. But 20 years from now, they may not be practicing anymore. And then I guess lastly, it's just been a hell of a lot of fun. I mean, we're doing it. We're learning. I think the more that we do this, Joe, the more connection we see among the people that we interview, talking about how not being a lawyer in a courtroom is actually the way to get success in a courtroom. And we're seeing that in the criminal side, practitioners, civil practitioners, and it's really cool. And so it's an experiment, and I think we're going to continue going forward, and we're having a lot of fun doing it. So
And Joe,
You make it fun. Yeah, no.
and Joe, I'll tell you, mine is brief. I met a young, great guy at the CA's office here in Henrico County that has a moral compass that's second to none and that works very hard and is passionate about what he does. And I kind of built this with another human, and his love kind of spilled over to me for trial work. For me, trial work is not reading books. For me, trial work is not going to conferences because I'm on a smaller budget than the civil guys. For me, trial work is getting on my feet every single day in court and just connecting to human beings and looking at the cues and feeding off these cues and adapting as a human. And that's how I've learned trial work. It's through trying cases. And then when I saw his love for it, and I was like, man, we share this love and this amazing human that I now look forward to spending time with, also on the screen or in person. And then afterwards, we usually go out for a piece of steak or a drink. So that's why I do it. And with that, it helps me connect to other great human beings, because I don't think you can be a great trial attorney without being a great human being. And you touched on it from the start, and I will tell you, I can see your success, which is evident from this podcast. We talked for about an hour. I felt like I knew you, and I've known you for years. And that is where the connection is made, and that is where you actually build credibility, and that is where you actually make change and persuade and get people in your circle. So I appreciate you.
Well, I love what you guys are doing, because it's nice to thank you for your comments, by the way. What I'm hearing from both of you is that you love each other, and that you feel blessed by the opportunity to do what we do, and that you want to be the best at that and the best human in the process. And that I also hear a love for people, because in my experience, truly the best people who do what we do, they care about people. And this really is a life of service if you treat it the right way. We're supposed to all be in service of others, in my opinion. So, and it's nice to be able to get off the hamster wheel for long enough to talk about the hamster wheel, right? Like if you're constantly in trial and you don't get to talk to other people, one of the blessings that I've had from being all over the country is I get to see all these different ways that people go about practicing law. And it's been eye-opening, and I've stolen little pieces from all over the place, and that it's kind of become who I am. So this has been fun.
yeah, well, thank you, Joe. Come on up to Richmond. Actually, Penn Crawford is a very good friend of mine, and I know you're working a case or two with him. So next time you're in town, let us know.
I'm probably my next. I may actually try a case in Norfolk.
Oh, I think we talked about that one. Is that the one where you were considering raising the damnum? I think the amount asked.
It's a case that involves a young person who I won't get into it because it's an active case, but yeah, we're gonna try to change the idea of value in Norfolk.
And next time you're in DC or Virginia, you let me know. I got a great Lebanese restaurant in Amman, and it's yeah. So it'll be good to sit down, have a great meal with you and Sharif, and just chat a little more into a part 2 of this. So appreciate you so greatly.
You had me at food. And I literally, I mean, down, if you're ever down this way, I know there's probably not a need, but if you're ever down in Atlanta, we actually have a few great restaurants, including one that's kind of a hole in the wall that's kind of a sleeper because it's not as fancy as the others, but the food's amazing. So, all right, guys.
You guys have
thanks
a hell of a lot of good trial lawyers too. I mean, guys, Don Keenan is based out of Atlanta for a long time. Lloyd Bell, who's a fellow VMI and Army guy, is out of Atlanta. Your firm.
Lloyd's
I mean,
a good
gosh.
friend. In fact, Lloyd and I, when we sat next to each other by happenstance flying out to TLU last time. So yeah, he's a really good trial lawyer and a good guy. And we don't hold that VMI thing against him too much.
Actually, I think you can see my diploma in the screen. Yeah, you can. Anyway,
That's right.
Well, Joe, I look forward to seeing you at the, I'm sure I'll see you at another TLU. And again, thank you so much for joining us.
Appreciate you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to RVA Trial Lawyers, Richmond's trial lawyer podcast. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Camaraderie and mentorship are essential to success as a trial lawyer. For that reason, RVA Trial Lawyers maintains a LinkedIn group for Richmond's trial lawyers. We invite you to join the RVA Trial Lawyer community. Check out our website at rvatriallawyers.com for more information. Thanks again for listening. We appreciate you, and we appreciate the important work that you do.